Hey friends, welcome back. We are going to keep reading The Outcasts of 19 Schuyler Place by E.L. Coningsburg. Remember, I don't own the copyright to this book. We're just reading it out loud together for educational purposes. So, last time we read, Margaret came up with a plan to help stop the demolition of the towers, and she told Jake, but she didn't tell us. So, we are going to go ahead and pick back up at chapter 19. I got through dinner without mentioning the towers even once, and afterward, Uncle Alex and I took Tartufo for his walk. Tartufo likes to walk at night, he said. In Italy, where he was born, they train truffle dogs mostly at night because the Tartufi, the truffle hunters, like to keep their best locations secret. People have been known to kidnap prize truffle dogs. Truffle hunting is a very competitive business. The season is short and the rewards are high. There's safety in secrets. What if Tartufo never finds any truffles, Uncle? I don't care. He keeps me doing something from within myself for the sake of something that is not. Tartufo is good company. Uncle Morris doesn't think so. Yes, he does. That's his secret, Adis Margaret come. We'll let him keep it. Doing something from within yourself for something that is not. Is that why you built the towers? Probably. They kept Morris and me going through some bad times. It was good having something that was common to both of us that was its own thing besides. Other people have children they raise. The children are from both parents, but also someone in their own right. They are good company while you have them, but you have to let them go. Like the towers, Uncle? Is that why you don't care that the towers are coming down? Uncle Alex stopped short, but Tartufo kept going, tugging on the leash. Without looking at me, he resumed walking. So you know. Yes, I know. I guess I should be relieved. Neither Morris nor I could bring ourselves to tell you. Because you really do care. Of course we care, but it's like having kids or like having Tartufo. Having them is more important than keeping them. Can you understand that, Adis Margaret come? Not really. Maybe it will take a few more years. A few more years? I thought they were going to start next week. I mean, a few more years for you to understand that 'tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. What's that? Tennyson. Was he an artist? No, a poet who lost a dear friend. I reached over for Uncle's hand. Yeah, he said, lifting my hand to his lips and kissing my fingertips. Friends, sisters, towers, loved and lost. There's nothing more to say. Sorry, somebody is mowing the grass outside, so if you hear that kind of noise, I'm really sorry. When we returned to the house, Uncle Alex said to Uncle Morris, She knows. You told her? I did not. Then how does she know? I hated having people talk about me in the third person, as if I weren't there. Why don't you ask me? So, Uncle Morris asked, you found out how? By careful editing, leaving out as much as I put in, I told them how I had found out. I worried whether not telling them my plans was a lie, and decided that it wasn't. It was a secret. And hadn't Uncle just said that there's safety in secrets? Feeling relieved about telling the truth, but not the whole truth, I asked my uncles if they would sell me the towers for $1 apiece. As part of our afternoon planning, Jake had given me a cash advance on the refund I was due from Taliqua. Why do you want them, Margaret come? You will have the house. It's in our will that you will inherit the house. The towers, they're not worth anything at all. They are what we call in business a liability. Not to me. I want to say they're mine, even if it is only for a little while. Like having children. Uncle Alex, who caught the reference and was touched by it, said, Morris, the child wants them. Give them to her. No, I insisted. I must buy them. I have the money. All right, he said. Then, turning to his brother, he said, Alex, you write up a paper, and we'll get it notarized. Notarized? Where did you learn of such things? I did my best imitation of the old world shrug. 6th grade. The following morning, my uncles and I made a trip to the bank, where they normally did their time zone business. Mr. McDowell, their loan officer, made out an official bill of sale. Before I turned over my $3 to complete the sale, Mr. McDowell asked my uncles, Does this niece of yours realize that if anyone gets hurt as a result of something falling from them, or if anyone falls off of them, she can be sued? I truly hated being talked about as if I weren't there. I said, we have a fence and a vicious dog to keep them out. If they get in, they'll be trespassing. Mr. McDowell still wouldn't talk to me. Does your niece know the towers have been condemned? Condemned? I asked. Condemned to die like someone guilty of a crime? That got his attention, and at last he addressed me. In the case of a building, it means unfit for use by official order. Unfit for use? How stupid. The towers have no use. My mother says they don't need to be useful. She says that they are superfluous and that is their power because without them our world would be less beautiful and a lot less fun. Mr. McDowell said, She's a sassy one, isn't she? She, Uncle Alex asked. You must not mean our Margaret Rose. Our Margaret Rose isn't sassy. She's incorrigible. Mr. McDowell cleared his throat and notarized the bill of sale. Chapter 20. For the next 5 days between the time that Uncle Alex left for the time zone and the time that Uncle Morris returned, I laid in supplies. I already had a rain poncho, a sleeping bag, sunblock, and a mosquito repellent among the stuff I had brought back from Tahlequah. I bought quantities of bottled water, trail mix, beef jerky, and towelettes. These items required multiple trips by bus to various distant strip malls so I could avoid those that were near SCHUYLER Place or my family home, because I didn't want anyone who knew me to spot me. And of course, I stayed clear of the 5 Mile Creek Mall. I bought a little bit at a time so I could find places to stash things. Every time I went out, I bought a pound of cottage cheese, ate some, dumped the rest, washed the container, and stashed it in my bottom dresser drawer. I also made many important long-distance phone calls. I called Loretta Bevilacqua at work and got her administrative assistant, who insisted that Ms. Bevilacqua could not come to the phone, but I was free to leave a message either with him or on voicemail. When will she get it? I asked. When she checks her messages. Can I tell her not to call me during certain hours? You certainly may, but of course that could delay her response. I chose voicemail. I said I now owned them. I said that they cost $3 and that it was notarized, but I didn't ask for a return call. I always had better luck reaching Peter Vanderwall. Either a polite female voice said, Sheboygan Art Center, and then connected me directly to Peter, or Peter himself answered. He reported that he was making progress on getting the CPC organized, but it was taking a lot longer than he had thought it would. At my own expense, I'm sending letters out by Federal Express with prepaid return envelopes, and you have no idea, I certainly didn't, how expensive that has turned out to be. So far, I have received only 3 of them back. When I call to remind them, they don't call back. I sympathized with him and told him the difficulties I was having in reaching Loretta. Peter said, I thought she would return calls directly. Why did you think that? Because she truly is a busy person. Truly busy people don't dilly-dally. They are decisive and they return phone calls. It's those of lesser importance who have to impress you with how busy they are and how they can't get around to your request. But she has an administrative assistant. Darling, Peter said, you are sunk unless you can find some way to get around her. Him. Worse, Peter said. When the administrative assistant is a male, he is hell-bent on proving how important he is, so he works overtime protecting his boss from the people she has to do business with. Tell me, don't you have any way to get around him? I said that I had a home number, but when Loretta's business hours were over and the administrative assistant was off duty, my uncles were home, and I didn't want to make or receive calls then. And that's when Peter Vanderwall volunteered to be my go-between. Give me that number, and I'll be your administrative assistant, darling, and you can just go about your business of stopping the demolition. I thanked him, and he said, nothing to it. I'm coming home this weekend to light a fire under a few art professors at Clarion State University. They should be mounting the barricades instead of sitting on their writing hands. I hope to shame them into becoming active. Will I see you? I asked. You tell me when to come, and we'll have a secret visit in the Tower Garden. You'll recognize me, even though I don't look at all like that picture in my mother's office. I probably don't look like anyone you've ever seen. I have a diamond stud in my left ear. I always wear a bow tie, and I shave my head. But trust me, you'll find me adorable. I could hardly wait. He was pinker and rounder than I had pictured him in my mind, but he was everything else I had hoped he would be. When he said we, as in, we ought to go to Summit Street and get a latte, that we meant him, Peter, and me, Margaret, and the latte meant a cup of coffee with a lot of steamy milk in it, served in a special glass with a metal holder. As we sat at the small round table that was outside the restaurant, I put my elbows on the table, leaned forward, and stared deeply into Peter's eyes. He was so fascinating. How's your father's dialysis? I asked. Oh, he's all right. I'm sure it keeps Mother busy, and that's good. Why is that good? What with all the care she has to give to Dad, I don't think she wants grandchildren at the moment, so she doesn't keep asking me when I'm going to get married. Mothers are so needy. I let my wrist go limp as I dangled my latte spoon in my right hand. You don't care for children? I can stand a few of them as individuals, but God forgive me, not in groups. I stirred my drink and took a sip, and in my best movie star manner, looked at Peter over the rim of my glass before putting it down. That's fascinating. I thought the very same thing after my experience with Tahlequah. Tahlequah? What's a Tahlequah? It's a summer camp where I was being warehoused. Well, Peter said, I had a summer camp experience once. Day camp. 2 weeks. It was not pleasant, but then neither was I. Oh, I said, marveling at how much we had in common. I was called incorrigible. How did you escape? Uncle Alex rescued me. Well, Margaret Rose, you must regard all of life's experiences as corners in the maze of life. Round the corner or bump into it, it's all part of getting there. Getting where? To being grown up. Is being grown up worth it? You betcha. Why? Because grown-ups get to make all the movies, get to lead all the orchestras, and get to get their ears pierced without asking permission. We laughed, and I decided we were the two most sophisticated people drinking lattes at the little round table on the pedestrian mall in all of Epiphany, and possibly France. Has Loretta told you what she has planned to do to save the towers? No. She's a lawyer, you know. You can't wedge a toothpick between her lips if her lips are sealed. She just keeps telling me that I am phase 2, as if repetition is the mother of intervention. She keeps telling me that I'm phase 1. And she is phase 3, and the only hint she will give me is that her famous phase 3 has something to do with Infinitel, and that she has to make a presentation to the board of directors. Poor thing. I, too, have a board of directors. The funny thing is that they love me so much they expect me to tell them what I want, and then they expect me to ask their permission to do it. Have you ever had to deal with a board? Yes, I replied, the Board of Education. And from what I read in the papers, they can't agree on anything except how many days we are to spend in school. What I was saying was not exactly true, because at that point in my life, I never read the paper. If I had, I would have had at least a hint the towers were coming down. Peter looked at his watch, a huge thing, as big as a sundial, with enough bells and whistles to run a railroad. I have an appointment with 2 professors from the art department and 2 from the history department. I hope to get their signatures on the CPC petition today, so I can get it into my mother's hands. She's promised to sneak it onto the city council agenda when they meet next time. What time did you say your uncles get home? On Saturdays, they both stay until closing. They won't be getting home until about 10. Good, Peter said. I'll be bringing by 4 professors, 2 from art and 2 from history later this afternoon. I want to show them what a treasure we have here in Old Town. That will be fine, I said. You have my permission. Peter, who had just raised his arm toward the waitress to signal for the check, let his hand go limp. Permission? He asked. Yes. If I didn't give my permission, they would be trespassing. I own the towers now. I bought them this past week. I have the bill of sale in my underwear drawer. It's notarized. You own the towers? Yes. Loretta insisted that I buy them. She did she? I wish she had asked me to buy them. Why? I would have loved to own them. I would be their proud possessor, even if only for a little while. Do you think that's just too romantic? I replied. 'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Ah, yes, Tennyson, he said. He got a faraway look in his eyes and then snapped back to attention. In the meantime, you have phase 1 to carry out. Stop them. And I have phase 2. Stall them. Stop and stall. Has a good ring to it. The waitress came and gave Peter the check. He paid with cash, piling the bills on top of the tab. Margaret Rose, my dear, when I was growing up on Schuyler Place, I never once thought there would come a day when I would spend $3 for a cup of coffee and enjoy it. But then I never knew that the daughter of my chum Naomi Landau would provide me with such charming company. Now I'm off to meet the supremes of academe. Are they rainmakers? They think they are, but frankly, my dear, all 4 of them together couldn't fill a latte cup with pee. Chapter 21. On the Tuesday evening before Jake's next visit, the uncles walked around their garden. Tartufo ran figure 8s around the bases of Tower 1 and 2. Uncle Alex held his hands behind his back and scanned the towers top to bottom. On Thursday, he said, the workmen will come to wrap the towers in netting to keep loosened pieces from falling onto someone. This old tower garden will become a hard hat area. Uncle Morris examined his pepper plants. Some of these will rot, he said. Let them. Then he had a second thought. Tell Jake to help himself to whatever he wants. He can take some back to Taliqua. You can tell him yourself, Uncle. He'll be here early in the morning. No, I'll be at the mall. The Mall Association decided to have a Bastille Day blowout. Uncle Alex and I will both work both shifts. We'll be gone all day Wednesday to prepare and all day Thursday, hopefully to sell. Uncle Alex told me he was counting on me to take care of Tartufo both days. That meant that Jake and I would have all day to carry out our plans, instead of having to crowd the work into the hours between the time Uncle Alex left and Uncle Morris came home. Uncle Morris said, 12 hours of being cooped up in the time zone with my brother makes me wish I was an only child. By the second day, I fear that I may arrange it. When Jake arrived, we wasted no time in putting our plan into action. We had chosen Tower 2, and we had chosen a height that was above the rooftops, but where the tower was still wide enough for a platform that would allow enough space to store all of my supplies and still give me room to sit or lie down. Jake climbed up first and measured the span between the uprights. Then together we went to the basement to choose boards that were long enough to rest easily on the rungs. There were not enough of them, so we hurried to the lumber store and had planks cut to the correct lengths. When we returned with the lumber, Tartufo would not let me out of his sight. He circled my legs, as twitchy as an ADD, an attention deficit dog. After assembling all the boards, we constructed a platform by lifting planks from my bedroom window to the rungs of Tower 2 that were just above the height of the window. From inside the room, I pushed them through the open window at an angle that allowed Jake to reach down, grab them, and lift them into place. After 2 were down, he lashed them to each other and to the horizontal rungs. The knots, hitch knots, tightened when pulled. Impressed? He asked. Very. I was a Boy Scout. Surprised? Very. When the last of the boards was in place and tied down, Jake bounced up and down a few times and declared, "Sturdy enough for one 12-year-old and her supplies." My living space would be a square platform, 4 feet on a side. Finally, we laid a wide board to reach from the platform to the open bedroom window to use as a gangplank. It rested at a steep angle, which made navigating dangerous, but by being cautious and by not hurrying, we managed to transfer all my accumulated supplies without a single slip. We worked from a list I had prepared: a poncho for rain, an umbrella for sun, water, lots of water, crackers, beef jerky, and trail mix, a Walkman, 3 books from my summer reading list, my documents of ownership in a gallon-sized Ziploc plastic bag, a flashlight, and a stack of cottage cheese containers with lids. Without a word, Jake picked up the stack of cottage cheese containers and carried it down the plank, across the bedroom, down the stairs, and into the kitchen, where he deposited it in the trash on the way to the truck, which was parked in an alley. I waited on the platform, wondering. Jake returned with 2 things, a chemical toilet and a tarpaulin that he used to cover furniture and floors when he was painting. "I'll drape this over 3 sides of the platform. I'll leave the side next to the house open. That should give you enough privacy for when you have to use this," he said, pointing to the chemical toilet. "Tilly has an inventory of these things for camping trips at Tahlequah. I borrowed one." I was too embarrassed to say something, and too grateful not to. I said, "Köszönöm," a simple thank you in Hungarian, and he understood. "I told you, I was once a Boy Scout. We were trained to help ladies in distress." It was late in the afternoon when we finished. Jake did some work on his drawing of the rose as I warmed up our leftovers for our supper. We had little to say to each other as we ate, but Tartufo made up for our quiet. He whimpered. He pranced around my legs, his nails clattering on the kitchen linoleum like hail hitting a tin roof. He was demanding more attention than I had time or patience for. I knew I had to give him a good, long walk. I invited Jake to come along. "Sure," he said, lighting a cigar on his way out. He took the leash from me as soon as we were out the door. "Let me," I said. "It will be our last walk for a while." Jake turned the leash back over to me. I was relieved to have something to do that kept me from linking arms with him. We walked down one side of Schuyler Place, and as we passed number 17, I told him about my failure as a starter babysitter. We walked back on the other side of the street. Jake stopped at the same spot I had the week before. He gazed over the rooftops at Tower 2. Some of the glass pendants caught tiny pinpoints of light from the street lamp, and the slight breeze set some of them to trembling like wind chimes. Jake shook his head. How could anyone believe that taking down these towers would improve the neighborhood? Some of us don't. At the moment, Margaret Rose Kane, we are the sum of the sum. And with that, he swept me up into his arms and carried me across the street. It would have been as romantic as a groom carrying a bride across the threshold if Tartufo had not gone wild and nipped at Jake's heels all the way. When we returned to the platform, we again checked the supplies against my list. Tartufo wailed so long and loud that Jake slammed the bedroom window down onto the plank that was resting on the sill. He succeeded in muffling the sound slightly. At last, he asked, "Are you ready?" My throat was too dry to answer, so I nodded yes. I put the heavy athletic sock from my uncle's box on my right foot and folded down the cuff once and then again. Jake looked at me for a final okay before locking one hoop of the cuffs to my ankle and the other to the vertical post of Tower 2. He pocketed the key and climbed back down the plank and through the bedroom window. Before he could pull the plank back through, Tartufo jumped, and in one giant leap, he landed on the plank on 3 of his 4 feet. He did not take his eyes off me as he scratched and scrambled and reassembled his hindquarters. All of my outer self was frozen with fear, but my stomach roiled like a tsunami and my heart pounded like surf erupting on shore. At last, Tartufo managed to get all 4 paws on the plank and made his way grandly, head held high, onto the platform by my side. "Get back here," Jake yelled. "Must he?" I asked. "Of course he must. You can't keep him up there." "Why not?" "For one thing, Tartufo can't use a cottage cheese container or a chemical toilet." "How are you going to get him back?" "I'll climb back up there, get behind him, and shove." "What if he slides off the plank and falls?" "What if I do?" "You won't." "Neither will he." "Uncle Alex asked me to take care of him." "He's going to be no end of trouble, but he'll also be good company." Jake was tired. He had no energy left to convince me, so he shrugged and pulled the plank through the bedroom window. "That dog is going to be no end of trouble," he repeated, half to himself, half to the almost rose ceiling. He slammed the window shut, locked it from the inside, and left. I stood upright, high up in the night sky, feeling as if the mild summer breeze could pass through my ribs as easily as it did the ribs of Tower 2. I reached over to Tartufo. "Well, we've done it," I said. At that moment, I could not have said whether done it meant that I was where I wanted to be, or that I had alienated the last person in the world that I wanted to. That's where we're going to leave it for today. So Margaret Rose and Tartufo, Margaret is handcuffed by her ankle to Tower 2, and Tartufo is also up there with her. So that is her grand plan for stopping the demolition. So join me tomorrow. We will see if her grand plan works.